and welcome everyone to the US Web Design System monthly call for August of 2024. Welcome back. I hope you're having as good a summer as possible, and for our team at least, July can be a great time to have a bit of focus time. And this month, we're simply celebrating the season with some warm summer colors in the USWDS logo: yellows, blue, green, and orange. Slide 2. My name is Dan Williams, he, him, and I'm the USWDS project lead. And here on my screen is my avatar: dark hair, blue sweater, collared shirt, and as of this month, the avatar now also features glasses, matching real life me, who is today wearing a gray shirt and yellow socks, approximately gold 30V. As Jeannie mentioned, we are recording this call, and I'm happy to say we've started to be able to share the recordings of these monthly calls publicly. You can find pretty much everything from the last year's worth of monthly calls back to January 2023 on our website at designsystem.digital.gov/about/monthly-calls. We typically post videos shortly after the monthly call, and we also link out to the slides and the script hosted at Digitalgov. We've also started collecting each month's Q&A as a GitHub discussion linked from the monthly calls page. We've posted a link to our monthly calls page in the chat. And we'll be posting other links and references into the chat as we go along, and I encourage you to ask questions in the chat at any time. If any member of our team can answer your question in the chat, we'll do so. Otherwise, there'll be some time for Q&A at the end of the hour. Also, be sure to introduce yourself in the chat as well. It's nice to know who's here, and it is good to have you here today. For those of you who find that chat distracting, you're welcome to close or hide the chat window during the main presentation, and you can reopen it later during the Q&A session at the end of the call. So thanks. And with that, let's get started with slide 3. So what's our agenda for today? We've got a number of things to show off, largely influenced by community suggestions. First, we've got a couple new sites to feature. I didn't make a bullet point for that, but a couple exciting new sites to feature. And we've got a number of product updates. And then we'll answer some community questions that came in, preview a new USWDS design kit in Figma, and then we'll talk through what it takes to go from alpha to beta in our new USWDS web components and what you can expect once those are out. And hopefully still be able to get to some Q&A. We had so many things I had to cut sort of featured sites from the schedule, but we've got them coming up, and we'll get right into them with slide 4, featured sites. There are a couple of really, I think, exceptional examples today. Slide 5. So first, SEC.gov, a new site from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC was founded to help our country respond to the Great Depression. It's the agency that protects investors from misconduct, promotes fairness and efficiency in the securities markets, and facilitates capital formation for those looking to hire, innovate, and grow. The new site has a number of navigational display elements on the front page, but it's really sensitively organized to still seem really clear and approachable. The site has a crisp blue and white color scheme, the Gov banner at the top of the page, and the SEC seal up in the top left, a quick links section in the hero, as well as the words, "We make markets work better." Slide 6. And we're also pleased to show the redesigned vote.gov. This new redesign from vote.gov features a large close-up image of the American flag on a somewhat greenish background of cool blue, somewhere between cool blue and cool mint. The typography is a solid combination of Merriweather headings and Source Sans Pro text. Notably, the site also features the language access select button up at the top of the page in the banner, which is an emerging pattern that really seems promising. So we're following along with that. And the text in the hero reads, "Register to vote or update your registration." Slide 7. So congratulations and great work here. Be sure to let our team know when a new site launches, either with an email or a note on the USWDS public Slack channel. Slide 8. So now for a few product updates. Slide 9. We've got USWDS 3.8.2 out now. Slide 10. USWDS 3.8.2 is a small patch release that addresses an issue a user was finding in their security scans. We had a polyfill dependency that used a regular expression that technically flagged this expression as a distributed denial of service vulnerability, but that we don't really consider that exploitable of where we use it in the code. But nevertheless, we removed that polyfill. And now, since and this polyfill was part of support for IE11, and we released USWDS 3.0 and dropped official support for IE11, but we left our polyfills in place. And this release is the first release that really begins to remove those polyfills. And once we've started to do it, once we've had a good reason to do it, we expect to do more to remove the IE11 specific polyfills and IE specific code as we move forward. Slide 11. We're also getting ready to release USWDS Compile 1.2.0. Compile is our package that uses Gulp to compile Project SAS into final CSS. Compile 1.2.0 will update the package to the most recent major version of Gulp, Gulp 5, in addition to providing support for disabling source maps on the final compiled files. And USWDS Compile 1.2.0 is coming next week. Slide 12. And we've also got USWDS 3.9.0 on the way. And this one has a number of good improvements as well. Slide 13. So here are a number of the key improvements in USWDS 3.9. It fixes a tab order bug in the mobile header. It fixes a keyboard mouse interaction issue in the date picker. It will improve the performance of input mask. It'll improve the legibility of pagination links, and it adds the ability to add a custom breakpoint to utility output. So there's a number of good improvements, good fixes in there. So look forward to USWDS 3.9. Slide 14. We're working hard on it, and this release will be available by the end of August. Slide 15. We're continuing progress publishing accessibility test pages as well. We've got a few new ones published. We've got a few big ones up on the site now. Identifier, footer, header, list. We're posting links to these new pages in the chat. And we're working on a bunch of new component test pages for next month. 3 new ones: checkbox, radio button, and combo box. So stay tuned for those. Slide 16. Now, I'd like to pass it over to our experience design lead, Ann Petersen, to talk about some of what we're doing in the world of usability research, and as well as speaking to a common community question about component proposals. So Ann, welcome, and can you give a brief self-description for folks and take it from here?
Sure can. Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. I'm Ann. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm a white person with short brown hair and small glasses and headphones today in kind of a linen-y blue shirt. So in our ongoing usability research, slide 17, we now have our Zebra round of component usability testing results out on our research wiki. That's our most recent round of usability testing with people with disabilities. We also wanted to let you know that we have a survey ready for you. Well, for the federal employees in the audience, to get a better understanding of what you and your teams are working with day to day. We want to learn about your team size, team structure, resources, tech stacks, and the frameworks you use, and your familiarity with a few programming languages. Learning that, we can be more confident that we're building in a way that can be more seamlessly incorporated into your workflows. That survey might take about 10 to 15 minutes of your time, and your answers are anonymous. We'd love to hear from you before the survey closes on August 30th. Slide 18. We've also had conversations going in our public discussions on GitHub. I'd like to point out a handful. There are new component proposals for a step indicator, both track status variant and vertical variant. There's continued discussion on a new component proposal for tabs. We've also made progress on research for a new component called Glossary, which I'll go into a little bit more. There's an accessibility discussion about proving visitors' humanness. And finally, we have the Q&A from our June monthly call posted. So if you missed that call, you can quickly catch up. Slide 19. But on the topic of component proposals, let's talk in more depth about them. Slide 20. In advance of today's call, we asked what you wanted to hear about, and the new component proposal process and progress was one of those topics. We'll get to a few other topics later on. So in terms of the current state of that process, we've received several suggestions for new components, including a chat UI, toast, skip2, glossary, and a few step indicator variants, like I mentioned, as examples. We leave those discussions open for comment and voting from the community for a while. We'd love your contributions. But then what happens next? Slide 21. Process-wise, the next step is for us to figure out if the component or variant is something we think could be a good addition to the design system. And we first evaluate this through a usability and accessibility lens. Slide 22. Our research and accessibility specialists take a close look at the component and gather evidence to help us make the most informed decision possible. Slide 23. We've made some guiding questions that we use to consider each proposal. Slide 24. Generally, first, the kind of support this new component might provide, or the support that we currently have for the use case or that interaction. Slide 25. Like, does the component support a WCAG requirement? At what level? A, AA, AAA? What alternatives are there to fulfill that requirement? Does the component have a clear purpose and address a user need? Is there an existing solution in USWDS that better meets the need than the proposed solution? Like, if there is, we likely won't move forward with that proposal. Slide 26. And then what might not support this proposal? Slide 27. Do the usability and accessibility benefits outweigh any potential risks? Is this particular solution needed by the USWDS community? Has it been requested? How often? Or to what extent is it already being used across the government digital landscape? Have teams or other agency design systems created their own since they couldn't find it in USWDS? Slide 28. We document answers to these questions in a simple rubric that gives us a kind of high-level picture. This slide shows those questions with columns for yes and no. The answer to these questions needs to be yes for most of them, except for that middle question about whether there's an existing solution to fulfill the need. That should be a no. But if so, we'll feel more confident moving ahead. But any new component, slide 29, is a commitment. We support this component going forward until eventually, maybe, it gets retired far in the future. Adding any new component adds load to how much we actively support, even if the team doesn't grow. So we should be considerate of what and how much we add. This component will need to be robustly part of the system if we accept it. We'll do regular testing on every component, including this one, to make sure it's still meeting our accessibility and usability goals, and we'll make improvements to it over time, even if it's not being used a lot. And we have no concrete way to know how often a component is being used, might add. Slide 30. So in the midst of all of our other work, and this is just a quick view of all the discussions I mentioned, kind of let's highlight glossary. We are using glossary to pilot this process. Our UX and accessibility team members evaluated the suggestion, and we've decided we'll likely move it forward, but we have a little more investigating to do. So it's about to move into the, slide 31, conditionally approved part of the component lifecycle. More to come. Slide 32. But this is a new process for us too, so we're also figuring it out. Please let us know how it's going. And as always, our process here is still part of our product. We iterate everywhere. Slide 33. We also heard a few other questions from you all that are fairly specific, so we'll follow up on those in GitHub discussions. Again, the link will be in chat. A couple examples of those are about Vue 3 and the other about .NET. Slide 34. Next, we're going to talk about our new design kit, which is really exciting work and a great tool to support teams. And for that, I will pass back over to Dan.
All right. Thanks, Anne. Dan here. We've been asked for years at this point about modern design tool support. Now, As I get started, we do talk about specific tools at these calls, and we do have to get into the nitty gritty of support for specific products. But as it says on the box here, all references to specific brands, products, and companies are used only for illustrative purposes and do not imply endorsement by the US federal government or any federal government agency. So there are a couple great open source USWDS Figma design kits out there and available, but we do want to support some of these tools more directly, something that we build ourselves for a couple of key reasons. As we move forward into USWDS web components, we're going to be thinking hard about component configuration. What are the styling and functionality dials and switches that you can set in your theme? And the more configuration we build into our components, the closer our design assets will need to match the final functionality. And we'll also need to be thinking not just from the code side, but from the design side just as much. Like when designers are using this kit, what types of flexibility do they need to support their projects? Are there new switches? Are there new dials? Are there new things that designers really need to have to support the type of expressiveness that the design system supports? So today, design tools better support this connection between design and development. And since this connection, this relationship between design and code is really at the front of our mind in our shift to web components, it makes more and more sense for us to engage with these tools directly and to do some of this work ourselves. And that's what we're beginning to do when we think about a design kit in Figma. And so now with slide 35, let's try to take an early look at what we're building for USWDS in Figma. And let me just share a new window here. And so now we're looking at the USWDS beta design kit in Figma. So we're currently working on this. We're testing it internally. We haven't published it publicly yet, but we intend to be able to do that. We are working, as I said, from some of the work that is already in existing design kits in Figma, but we're trying to make some real changes that reflect the way that we think about working in the design system. Here, just a little bit of the documentation that we'll be sort of shipping along with it, just talking about what it means, talking about what's new, talking about what we're going to do next. We really hope that as we ship a design kit, it's going to be a tool for designers to know more about the design system, to learn about the design system, not just to copy components as a sticker sheet, which you can do and should do and is great, but also to learn about the design system at sort of a fundamental design level. So we are going to be doing a little bit of work to talk about typography tokens in the design system. We'll give an introduction to how you use type tokens and be talking about using those tokens. We'll be giving examples of the types of typography design tokens that are available in the design system. We're also going to be doing things like integrating color tokens into the assets sort of as natively as possible using variables. So how do you use color tokens? How do you add them to designs? How do you assign system level tokens, primitive tokens, to theme tokens or semantic level tokens, giving documentation of what we provide at the token level and then how you might theme that in your own project. Similarly with spacing tokens. Again, talking about that, giving examples of what we do here. We're working toward making this sort of a more and more comprehensive solution for designers using the design system. So what is this going to sort of feel like sort of in practice? To that, I'm just going to go over to this blank scratch pad here and just give a sense of what the USWDS Figma might sort of feel like. So one of the important things that we're doing with this work is to integrate tokens into everything that we build. Just as we do on the code side, we're doing this on the design side as well. And we're doing this through the mechanism of variables. So variables in this software can make it pretty easy to apply a value to something else. In this case, I've drawn a frame, a rectangular frame. I can give it a fill here. And when I give it a fill, I have options available. And those options are colors defined, USWDS tokens defined as variables. And some of the things we can see here are all of the color tokens we might be familiar with. So we can give this a color red 20 right here. We can make another frame inside of it. Maybe we'll make this one, let's see, green 70, green 70. So it's relatively straightforward to apply design tokens to frames, to text, to sort of whatever. Speaking of text, we may as well add a little bit of text here in the middle. Let's put that. Let's get it now. Oh, so it's inside this frame. Interesting. Let's make it a little smaller. That's kind of big. 40. All right. Anyhow, so now we've got a little bit of text here. I'll apply an auto layout to it, and I may as well do that with these as well. When we apply an auto layout, we can see that it sort of applies sort of this kind of padding margin relationship around the outside of a frame. And just as we did with color tokens, we can begin to apply spacing tokens to some of these values in the frame. So I can click on this here and maybe set this to, let's set these to 10 spacing units, make it hug, and we'll do the same thing over here. I set these to 10 spacing units as well. So applying spacing tokens is just about as straightforward as applying some of the other tokens. And of course, tokens also apply to typography. So if we go over here and select our text in the middle, currently says it's public sans, but there isn't a public sans token exactly in the design system. What we might want to do is make this what we might call a heading. So this is a heading. Let's make it a heading. Turns out that heading is already sort of defined as public sans in the system, but we'll look at how to change that. And we'll give it a size as well. In the design system, sizes are connected to font types. So we'll make this a heading. Let's make this a heading 20, very big. We can go back and make it a little smaller. Heading, whatever it is, outputs is 80. So we can apply design tokens to the to anything like that. So we can also begin to apply themes and change typography settings with Figma modes. Right now, I have this set up as color red 20, but maybe it's better set up with a theme color. So we could set this to secondary. Let's change this to secondary light. And let's change this to a cool accent. Accent cool, darker. And then you can use your definitions for variables to go in and make adjustments here. And you can change those things in your layer modes. So right now, right here, this layer mode is set to a project theme. We could change it back to our defaults. This is a default value for secondary and for accent cool, or switch it back to our project theme. And just like other things in the software, if we drag them out to another frame, sort of they automatically update to the properties of the frame that they're in. Now, this can be particularly interesting in the case of typography. In our existing kit, we're unable to make typography changes directly. for a number of reasons. But in this kit, we're beginning to support additional type values. We distribute things in public sans, but you can change that to some of our other type that's supported by the design system. So you remember we set that type to a heading level. We can change heading from being sans to a serif. We can change that to a serif, and it's the sort of the serif in the normalized type size that you would find in the design system. Similarly, we could change the value of that serif. We could make it Georgia instead of Merriweather, or change it back to Merriweather. And similarly, we could change the value of a sans here to Source Sans Pro. And if we change, again, the header back to a sans thing, it displays in Source Sans Pro. So everything can kind of be manipulated in the way that you might expect to manipulate things in the design system in code. We can do similar things with USWDS components. Components are beginning to have properties in the way that you would find those properties in the design system proper. We go in here to this, this simple sort of snack preferences form. We can see we have this input here. On this input, we could give it helper text. We could make this required by adding a required indicator. We could change this input from a text input to a select. We could put this into an error state and also add error text in here that is editable, just as the helper text is editable. All of these things you can begin to control right inside the component properties. Some people love to work within properties and not detach a component from its source. Some people will just detach right off the bat and work with things directly. That's okay too. What we want to do, though, is make the components more functional using properties right out of the gate. So we know kind of the default ways that you're able to manipulate components right from the design software itself. And we're building that into all kinds of, into all of the design system components that we develop in this kit. They'll have a full sort of range of properties available to them that reflect what they're able to do in the code. So more and more, we're working towards a future where we can deliver components that are more directly configurable via settings and more directly connectable to the code that we deliver down the road when things move out of the design phase. So in general, we're working to build a design system that's flexible and expressive, one that helps build experiences that are tuned and tailored, yet broadly related and familiar. And more helping designers and developers work from the same set of rules, but using the tools and idioms that are familiar to them. So this is really important to us. We're putting a lot of time and effort into thinking it through. And it's really one of the key elements in our vision of empowered and supported digital service teams and familiar and easy to use digital services. So that's just a little look at the USWDS kit in Figma. We're back in the slides now, back up to slide 36. So as we work through this USWDS beta design kit in Figma will feature, design tokens as variables, attribute-powered components, mode-based fonts and themes, extensive examples and guidance, and of course, auto layout and other native functionality that you expect. So there's more to come on this. We hope to begin publishing our work soon publicly. We're doing a lot of testing internally right now, but we want to get this out into the public as soon as we can. So more to come with that. Now, let's finish by moving on into the web components beta phase, slide 37. So today, as we start to make the shift from our alpha level experiments into a public beta, we want to talk a bit about how that'll work. Like what makes a beta release? We'll look at our release maturity model, slide 39. And how do I get involved in the beta? How do I use the components? How do I leave feedback and comments? We'll also take a look at our documentation and communication expectations. And to do this, I'd like to introduce a couple of my colleagues. Slide 40. First, Amy Leadem. Amy's a contractor and an engineer on the USWDS core team. Amy, can you introduce yourself and give a quick self-description for folks?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Amy Leadem. My pronouns are she, her, and I have long, wavy brown hair and an orange sweater on today.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Slide 41. And I'd also like to introduce Matt Hendry. Henry, our engineering lead. Matt, can you introduce yourself and give a quick self-description for folks?
Sure can. Hey, y'all. Matt Henry, acting engineering lead for the design system. I'm a bald white man with glasses and a blue Oxford shirt, and my pronouns are he, him.
Great. Thank you, Matt. So why don't you take it away with a slide 42 demo?
Thanks. Yes. So in the June monthly call, I showed a demo of a couple of our early development web components and some of the ways that web components will change how you work with the design system going forward. If you haven't seen that one, it may be worth going back and checking it out. This update is going to focus less on how the components themselves work and more on how the design system team is thinking about what we're going to deliver, how we're going to deliver it, and on what timetable. So I am going to pull up a new page in our storybook. Great, which describes the development and release life cycle of our web components. So at a high level, this page lists the phases of maturity of each of the components that they'll go through from alpha all the way through production, and the criteria we'll be using to judge how far along the path to release the components are. So I'm not going to go through every criterion for every stage in this doc, but I want to give a quick overview and highlight some of the categories of things we'll be looking at each stage along the way. So first, alpha. At this point, components are in early active development and are very much not intended for anybody to use. We're still trying to figure out the best way of making the component do all the things it needs to do. And big changes are very likely along the way. But at the stage, it should still look and behave like the existing version 3 component. And even from this early stage, we have some automated accessibility testing happening, and that's more or less the same set of Axe core rules that run against version 3 of the design system. There are going to be basic documentation and examples in Storybook, and we'll also probably be using that as a sandbox and a test environment. Back in June, we talked a little about how web components are going to use plain old CSS for styling, and will support customization and theming through CSS variables, custom properties, and shadow parts. At this alpha stage, components may still be using the version 3 Sass internally in the component, but any customization will already be done through CSS variables, custom properties, and shadow parts again. Over the development of the components, it will be a goal to replace the internal Sass with CSS as well. But right away, we want to underline that any user-facing customization is going to happen, again, via CSS variables, custom properties, and shadow parts. All right, moving on. The next phase is what we're calling early beta, or beta 1. And at this stage, there might still be some large changes in the underlying code, but we're expecting to be able to support some use of the component on live sites with teams we're working with directly. So in order to support those users, we want to flesh out the documentation for the component a fair bit. But maybe the biggest change at this stage is that the component should meet all the criteria of the existing accessibility guidance for the version 3 component. Next up, mature beta. Now, mature beta components can be used by early adopters outside of the orbit of the teams with whom we're working directly. There's still a little bit of use at your own risk at this stage, but by the time we're calling a component mature beta, it's pretty baked, and we're confident it'll work pretty well in a wide range of contexts. In particular, we'll have tested the component alongside components from other frameworks we support, such as React, Angular, and Vue, to make sure that they behave as expected. At this stage, we'll also ensure that the components are as performant as we can make them, and that there aren't huge layout shifts or other kinds of poor performance indicators that are going to deliver a bad experience or potentially harm search result placement to the extent that search engines are factoring in user experience and performance metrics in their algorithms think, for instance, of how Lighthouse and Core Web Vitals can impact that stuff. Finally, production. Yay, look at that green. If a component is production ready, it's been tested by expert and evaluated by real users. Obviously, nobody can ever guarantee bug-free software, but if a component has reached this stage, it's been put through its paces and should consistently and reliably work as expected and work that way for all users. And before we move on from this topic, you may be wondering, how will I know where each component is at in its lifecycle journey? Great question, hypothetical interlocutor. On the main README for this project, here we are, there's a table that will list the components under development along with the stage they're at. And I expect we'll also include this information in the documentation for each component as well, but exactly what that's going to look like is a little bit yet to be decided at this point. So that's what we're thinking about the release lifecycle. But before I pass things over to Amy, I want to briefly demo some changes to the web components package itself. First of all, the name of the project is different. It's now USWDS Web Components. It used to be USWDS Next. It's a small change, but I think it's an important one because web components are going to be rolling out incrementally. Version 3 of the design system and web components are going to be living side by side for a while, so the new name reflects this continuity. The other big change is that when we last looked at the components together, each component was a separate package with its own configuration and its own build step. It was, if we can use a little jargon, a monorepo. Since then, we've simplified things a fair bit. USWDS Web Components is now just one package. You can still pick and choose which components you're going to pull into your application from that package, so you definitely don't need to include the code for every component on every page. But the setup this way is simpler for the design system team to develop with, and ultimately probably easier for you, the users. It does go back to the engineering principle of keeping our setup as simple as possible for as long as possible, and only layering in additional complexity when necessary. So finally, here's a quick demo of what that actually looks like. Going back to the docs here. There's a basic documentation page now explaining how to install the package and bring it into your site or application. So see how you'll be able to install it from NPM. Not today, but very, very soon. We haven't published it yet, but it's imminent. It's going to happen real soon. And then either import the entire set of components, like here, or just import the ones you're going to use in order to keep bundle sizes down and ship less code. So really quickly, let's see what this looks like in a sample page. So this is a very bare bones Vite app, literally just what you get if you run npm create Vite. All I've done is remove some parts of the default Vite template and added this link component here. We saw the banner last time. I would have liked to show the banner this time, but there's a little glitch happening with the banner, and that is show business. So we're using the link today. Let's see. When we look at this page, you can see that the link isn't actually a link yet because we haven't installed the web components package. So let's do that. Stop the server that's running. I'm going to install it. This is the web components package. I'm installing it directly from GitHub at the moment, again, because it's not published on NPM yet. It's going to think about that for a second. This usually doesn't take that long. And here we are in a demo land, and this is just sort of spinning. That's concerning. All right, there we go. Perfect. Just a little bit of suspense. Great. Now we have that loaded. We can pull in a script tag the code for the web components that we're already using. At this point, we're now pulling in all of the available. So like we could now import the banner, or we could use the banner on the page as well. All of the components that are in the package are available to this page to use at this point. So we can start the dev server back up and see that we have a link again doing linky things. And just to show that it works the other way I described, we can just import the single component. It'll reload, and yeah, same thing. So that's it. Simple package, simple installation, simple to use in your project. So that's all I've got for today. But with that, I'm going to pass it over to Amy Leadem, who will talk about how you can stay up to date on what's going on with components and how you can get involved. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. This is Amy again. As we mentioned earlier in the call, we are going to start transitioning some of our alpha components into beta in the next few weeks. Beta is the first phase where you as members of the community can start using and testing USWDS web components. We could really use your help during this phase. Once these beta components are ready, it would be helpful if you could import them into your test or sandbox environments, customize the components to fit your project needs, then provide feedback about your experience. We are building out some key documents that will outline how to do this. So today I'm going to walk you through how you will find instructions for using our web components and where you will go to provide feedback to the core team. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Where did it go? There it is. The first stop is our README. Matt just showed you this. And this is where you'll learn how to get started with USWDS web components. I'll keep it brief since Matt just showed you a preview, but I wanted to highlight that the README will continue to evolve as our components do. When our beta components are ready for use, the README will provide instructions for how to install and import the component package. It will also provide links to the resources you'll need to get up and running. And as Matt showed you earlier, the README is also where you'll find the status table for each of our components. So keep checking back here to learn more about what is currently available in the repo. Now, after you've installed the web component package, you'll need to learn how to add components to your project and customize them to fit your needs. This is where Storybook comes in. In USWDS 3, the implementation details for our components were largely found on our website, designsystem.digital.gov. But in USWDS web components, especially in these early phases, we are moving our documentation closer to the code. Our aim is to give you the information you need to build the component all in a central location. So we are focusing on writing comprehensive documentation with both JS Docs and Storybook so you can have a clear picture of how to use and customize our web components. On the screen, I'm showing the proposed Storybook docs for the identifier web component. As I scroll through, one thing to notice is that the methods for customizing and styling web components will be different from previous versions of the design system. Instead of editing full component markup and using Sass variables like you do in USWDS 3, with web components, you will use CSS parts and CSS variables, HTML slots and properties, and JavaScript methods and events to customize our components. Our aim is to capture all of that reference material in our Storybook docs. On the screen, we are showing a series of tables that will list out every property, slot, part, and variable that will be available in the identifier component, along with descriptions and default values for each. These will be the knobs and dials you'll use to tweak your implementation of the component. Soon, up here at the top, we'll also provide guidance for how to use each of these customization methods. These will live in the general docs up here at the top of the Storybook navigation list. Additionally, we are designing our controls, Storybook controls, to give you an interactive playground that lets you see the component adapt to customizations in real time. On the screen, I'm going to demonstrate how to quickly turn the default component text from English to Spanish with a single click using the lang control. Boop. And then I'm also going to show how you can get an instant preview with your custom content. So I'll demo just some of the pieces of what would be in our site's identifier. And we can even update the logo real quick, just to take a look. I'm sure we will explore this more with you in the future. But what I want to communicate with you now is that we are aiming to give you a thoughtful, intuitive component building experience. And finally, the last thing I want to share about Storybook is that the docs are The docs here will be your source for component code. If we go back to the docs file, you'll see that each component and variant will have a code preview available where you can copy the component code and paste it into your project. One cool thing that I want to highlight is that as we look at this code preview, you'll see that the customizations we added to the default story are reflected here in the code sample. From there, you can hit this copy button, and it should be a great starting point for your project. So now that you know where to go for instructions to install and customize our components, the next thing we'll need to walk through is how to give feedback about your experience. For that, let's start at the contributing Markdown file. That can be found here at the root of the project. The contributing MD files gives you an overview of the current paths for contributing to the web component project. On the screen, I'm showing that the current contributing MD outlines two methods for providing feedback. The first path is to submit bug reports in GitHub. So let's say you try to add a beta component to your project and discover that something specific is broken. If that happens, we'd love it if you could submit an issue in GitHub. This process will be very similar to how we currently do it in the USWDS repo. To do this, you'll simply go up to this Issues tab, click New Issue, and give details about what you're seeing. We'll work on adding an issue template so you have a little more guidance in the future. Go back to Contributing MD. There's one thing that is different about, while bug reports will generally be the same as the USWDS repo, one thing that's different is that we're asking you to not submit feature requests as issues at this time. Instead, we invite you to submit all ideas, concerns, and questions to our GitHub discussions board. To get there, you simply go up to the top of the repo, click this Discussions tab, and you'll see all the active discussions in the repo. Discussions will be our hub for communication in the beta phase. This is where you can share new ideas, express concerns, and ask questions to the USWDS core team and community. You can do this either by opening a new discussion by hitting the green New Discussion button, like this. You'll see all the different topics. Or you can participate in an existing discussion with reactions and comments. Let's open up this one. On the screen, I am showing a new discussion topic created by our very own Jacqueline Contrino. This discussion asks you to share details about your project tech stacks. We need to know which frameworks and tools our web components should be compatible with, and your responses here will help us understand that. We're adding a link to the post in this chat, and it would be great if you could go and contribute to the discussion, maybe right after this call. Heading back to the discussion page, discussions will not only be our hub for conversation about web components, but will also be where we make announcements about the web components efforts. So be sure to stay in the loop by checking in our discussions board regularly. And with that, I'll pass it back to you, Dan.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Let me share up again here and finish us up. So thanks. This is Dan again. We're expecting to get an initial package for this work out, fingers crossed, like by the end of this week via NPM at USWDS/web components. This will still feature alpha components, but the NPM package will be a good way to track our progress, in addition to what you'll find at the project hub through github.com/USWDS/web components and through the discussions. Slide 44. So what's next with this work? In addition to prepping everything for moving through and into the beta phase, we'll be publishing them via the Web Components NPM package, and we'll be getting to work on button, accordion, card, text input, and modal next. Slide 45. And then by the end of the fall, we should have at least a dozen components in the beta phase. So there's a lot to come. We're working hard. We'll be updating folks on our progress through all of our usual channels. So slide 46. Onward, and here we go.